Good evening. It's late January 2024, and I just got a message on Instagram or a comment asking if I still liked this diagonal cordon system for growing apples. The diagonal cordon system is basically a closely spaced row of apples that are leaned over at about 45 degrees or so on a trellis and maintained as basically like a single stem without a lot of long side branches. The short answer I gave him was yes, and why, like super short paragraph, but I thought I was cleaning my house and I was like, making a video on diagonal cordon sounds a lot funner than washing the third batch of dishes. So I'm just going to take a minute to do this video because I can do it off the top of my head. I know what I'm going to say, and I think we can cover all the important points. To start with, yeah, I love it. It's great for certain things. Okay, I've got my clippers and saw basket for Scions in case I cut anything. My grafting bucket, who knows what we'll need. I know I need that. With the diagonal cordon system, as you can see, is just closely spaced trees. These are 18 inches. I would go with the closest I would go is 18 inches. It works, but 2 feet is really better. So 18 inches to 3 feet apart would be kind of the spread, and they're bent over at, an angle. I would start at maybe like 60 degrees, kind of like this one right here, whatever that is, because if they get really heavy over time, they can tend to sag. It also depends on like how good your trellis system is. This is very poor. And other things, but they'll bear fine at 60, and that gives you some slop, so they're not going to start at 45 and then end up at like 30. The obvious advantage here is that you can fit like a whole bunch of varieties in a small space. I don't remember how long this is. It's like 40 feet or something like that, maybe 45 feet. And it is crazy diverse in here. Not only do I have each one of these started as a different variety, halfway up, most of them are grafted to a second variety. So there's 1 and then 2, and then a bunch of them I've worked over, which turns out to be amazing and extremely useful for making Franken-trees and top working and collecting stuff. I have some of these that are grafted to probably 30 or more varieties on one stem like this, because every single stem that comes off you can graft something on and it'll start bearing fruit pretty quick. So another useful thing for the system is that it starts to bear fruit very quick. Like sometimes you'll get fruit in the second year. Now the rationale for bending these things over is that it's supposed to simulate a branch that's bearing, right? So you get a branch on a natural tree that's not pruned, it grows up, it starts to bear, and then it starts to droop down, right? It just hangs down like this right here, like that. That sends certain signals. It tells this, the high points, to grow. Like this is going to be the new top of the tree because it's the highest thing. That's called apical dominance. And then this stuff is going to grow less and fruit more. So that's the rationale. How true that is, I don't really know, but it seems to work, and they bear really early. So the alternative to that would be to just grow them straight up, and people do that, and it's called a vertical cordon. I would not be surprised that if you did both systems side by side, that the vertical cordons would perform just the same. One other nice thing about the diagonal cordons is you get a lot more length of stem that you can reach, right? So if I can reach this easily here, but then it becomes vertical, well then some of it's going to be out of reach. Again, it's not like a big deal, but it's worth considering. Look at this one right here. Let's just count these. So these are a bunch of Irish apples I got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 18, 19, a little more than half that tree, 21 varieties. And these, I don't think any of these fruited this year, but they'll probably start next year. There's a fruit bud right there. There's a fruit bud right there. There's a fruit bud right there. Pretty cool. Now, when I made these originally, I didn't foresee that being an issue. In fact, I cut a bunch of these down and I tried to graft into them at the base, and they have not grown well. Like here's one here. It's only like 2 feet tall or less. That one hasn't grown great. That one hasn't grown great. So it turns out to be much better to just use the existing frame and framework on the Scions onto the existing sidewood. So yeah, what is it good for? It's good for small spaces. You have a small backyard. Look, you need a space like literally 2 or 3 feet wide, and however long you have, you can put it against a fence. amazing amount of diversity, high quality fruit. Okay, you'll get large, high quality fruit. For some reason, this pink parfait produces gigantic apples, bigger than anything else on any of my other pink parfait. These are all on Bud 9, I think. Why? I don't know. And it even does it when I allow it to overbear, which I do all the time. So where were we? Yeah. What are they good for? They're good for small spaces, like your backyard orchardist. It's absolutely amazing. Really, it is. You can't hardly beat it. Although you could do various other things that would perform similarly, like, what are they called? Espalier or espalier. That's like more aesthetically pleasing, and they can be made to be very, productive, but probably maybe not quite as productive as this. They're also good for trialing varieties. So let's say you're interested in breeding, or you're just interested in finding out, like, you find out about all these apples. Well, do they do well in your area? Are you going to plant like a whole tree, a standard size tree, which could take years and years to even start bearing any fruit, and then maybe you don't like it? You put in a row of these, this probably has 30 trees in this row. Graft each one to a different variety. Like I said, when it grows halfway up, you could graft on a second variety or even a third and get all this diversity, test what you like and don't like, and then you have the framework which you can replace. So you could take the stuff that you really like and you can make more of those, or you can keep collecting stuff, or you can start breeding and have a place to graft your scions until they go to fruit. How that works, I don't know, because that's an open question. So don't take that as advice, but it might be a possibility. It's certainly a possibility. I just don't know how well it would work. What I would not use them for personally is high production. Like if you're really just trying to produce a lot of apples to eat and you have space, I would be looking at a more proven system if you want to do intensive agriculture and not like a regular orchard. I'd be looking at some of the systems that have been developed for high production, like I guess tall spindle. There's so many now, and they keep coming up with more, so I'm not really up on them. I don't use any of them. But for the purposes I just said, testing varieties, small backyards, getting fruit quick, high quality fruit, they're great for all those things. I love them. I think it's just fantastic. Let's talk about planting and maintenance. So you need a trellis. This system is actually very simple and remarkably sturdy. So I have a T-post. I try to use heavy duty ones for this part. This is just a T-post pounded at an angle and then wired in place. See, just like regular baling wire. Look at that. I mean, that is remarkably sturdy, even with the heavy weight that this gets. Because when you get a big tree like that, biggest one over there, which is Pixie, and it's full of fruit. I mean, it's really pulling on that thing. And it's really, the problem has been more that my wires are saggy, and I use this stuff that kind of stretches. It's like a cable. I just used what I had. In fact, I don't even know if there's turnbuckles on that. This trellis is good enough. Like that system for the end posts are the problem. The rest of it's easy. It's the end post. So that works for the end post. So you don't have really any excuses there. When you plant them, you can plant them on an angle, and it's definitely recommended, even if you have the trellis in place, to put a stake in for at least the first few years. And that gives you something to train right up to, because you're going to get these little scions, right? And they're going to kind of like go everywhere, and you can just kind of tie them up with some plastic tape or something. So plant them on an angle, but not quite this as steep of an angle. So again, maybe kind of start them at like this angle or even a little bit higher. And then you can kind of bend them down, but you're better off planting them slightly upright versus all the way over. And yeah, you can graft them onto rootstocks, like buy rootstocks, graft them on. People ask me where to get rootstocks, by the way, in quantity. I use Willamette Valley Nursery and Copenhagen. They're both in Oregon, both very high quality. I also recommend buying bee stock, because all it is like it'll have a little side branch or it'll be crooked. Like, there's a stick and the stick curves, or the stick is straight and the root curves. It's just dumb stuff like that really doesn't matter at all. I've never gotten a bee rootstock from them, probably ever, that I couldn't use. If so, very rarely, and they're quite a bit cheaper. I like Bud 9. It's just a good stock. It does sucker quite a bit. I remember someone saying, like, what do you do about Bud 9 suckering? And I was like, I don't know. I don't really think I have that much of a problem. And right after that, I just started noticing, yeah, actually it suckers all the time. This is just crazy amount of suckers there. But you can pull those up and use them for rootstock, which I'm going to do this year. So yeah, you can graft them, just plant them right in place. You want to make sure that the graft union is, above the soil, because otherwise your stalk will root into the ground and then you'll have a full-size rootstock going and it will bypass the dwarfing stalk. People do this with standards and bigger than like the Bud 9 size. If you want fruit quick, I mean, it's an intensive small system, just use Bud 9. Bud 9's great. It's cheap enough. And it's a great stock. So as they grow up, you train them to the stick. And when it reaches a point where, you really can't reach anymore, like this is a little bit too high. Let's see what this is. And if there's some reason I haven't cut it down. Yeah, this is a cross between Pitmas and Pineapple and 692. So this is something I got from like one of the USDA collections or whatever it is at Geneva. And it has never been any good. I don't think I've had any apples off. I don't recall having any apples off this where I was like, oh, that's good. It's the kind of thing I would actually just graft over to something else. The ideal diagonal cordon looks a lot like this right here. You can see it's got these short branches that come out. There's a lot of them. Look in here. Look at this. That's perfect. That section right there. But they're short. They grow out. They start bearing fruit. And they don't overgrow after that. Okay, so that's partly a function of this particular variety is just well suited to this system. And some are and some aren't. And if you look in old books, you will find lists of varieties that are like, these are good for cordons. A great example is Allen's Everlasting. Other varieties are going to tend to be really twiggy and suckery, and also you're going to have some tip bearers, and you may have to prune those a little bit different, like Pink Parfait down there. That's why it's so messy. So as you come up, you need to encourage this, right? You need to encourage frequent branching, or you end up with things like this right here. We have a section of about a foot where there's really nothing. There's one little one here. So you got about a foot here where there's nothing going. So let's say you have a big section here. You can come along in the spring or late winter and just notch buds and just pick a bud and you say, well, I want a branch there. Just cut a little notch in the bark right above the bud, and that'll encourage them to come out. If you get to where like everything's growing, and say the shoots are like 6 inches long and you come out here and you're like, oh, well, there's shoots growing up here, but this whole section is bare. Well, go ahead right away and pick those buds that you want to grow and notch right above them and hope that it'll grow out. And it often does. I know I've done it on these. That's first thing, training. As they come up, make sure that you're getting fruitwood on there. And part of the reason that this is all sunburned and black and dead and full of borers is because there's no cover on this section, right? There's no shade. There's a little shade right here. Then there's nothing. So that's actually sunburn. And if you're in a hot area, you should paint the trunks of these, especially when you do something like this, where you're frameworking. So you cut everything off and you leave a lot of this stuff exposed. I was lucky on this that I didn't get sunburn. It's just one of those things I always end up putting off. Look at that. Sunburn right there. And we'll see that over and over and over again here. But that's what you want it to look like. It's just not always, things aren't going to cooperate all the time. So how do we do that? Well, you can't let things like this grow unchecked. And if you do, it's going to cost you later. It's going to form fruitwood out here like this coming year. When I go to do the remedial pruning after this grows out another year, well, I have to cut all that fruitwood off and start over again. Okay, so you really want to cut this stuff back nice and short. This to 3 buds, and so like one of these might grow and 1 or 2 might turn into like a fruit bud. Same here. Just keep shortening everything. And don't get obsessive about counting the buds and stuff. Like if you look up systems for training diagonal cordons or any cordons or anything super tight and dwarfy like this, you're going to find a bunch of conflicting information. There's going to be recommendations on summer pruning, which you should do. We'll get to that in a second, ideally. But they'll have specific dates, like do this, like cut it this much at this time and then cut it back again, all kinds of stuff like that. You can tell by the way that those vary so much that, there's no one right way to do it. Here's what I would recommend. Okay, first of all, don't use this system if you can't maintain it at all. If you're a total flake, like, be an adult, grapple with your own self, like not the hopeful self that's like, oh, I'm going to change. Do you maintain stuff or not? And I'm right in between. So I can pull this off, but I barely pull it off. And sometimes I screw up and have to cut off a bunch of fruiting wood. You got to maintain these. Now, if you're the kind of person that's really on top of maintenance and enjoys that kind of thing and you're a super control freak, you'll love this, okay? So what I would do is in the summer, when this stuff is growing out, like when it's partly grown out, and maybe in July, let's say this one's grown to like here. Everything's, green and leafy. Just come in and cut it to like something like that. Okay, so I've got like 5 buds here, 6 buds maybe. It looks like 6 buds. And what that's going to do is 1 or 2 of these is going to shoot up and grow some more. Okay, and then in the fall, you can come back again and cut off 2 or 3 of these buds like that. And that's going to really encourage some of these to form into fruiting buds. And then you end up with this little fruiting cluster right there. And that's exactly what we want. So that's a pretty good system. It's been a long time since I've summer pruned these. I get way too busy. I don't even remember that I'm supposed to do it. I don't think about it, anything. I think it's better. I think you should do it if you can. But it's not absolutely necessary. If you're not summer pruning, what really works is to cut it back to 3 or 4 buds. So one of these might grow up, one might grow out a little bit, and then you can shorten that, and that'll become another fruiting cluster, and then this one will just stop and bear fruit just like that one has. Okay, so cut them back to like that many. People recommend as many as 3 prunings a year. I don't think that's necessary. I think if you're going to do it and try to do it, right, I would really just go with that double prune where you shorten it once in the summer and leave like a couple of extra buds. Don't overthink it, okay? Don't overthink it. Just come in here and say, I'm going to leave these like 6 inches long or whatever. And it doesn't matter what direction they face because you're going to cut them off later anyway. And then I can come along here in the winter and shorten them up like that. Just start training for this form right away, for this little gnarly, branchy, close form like this. Like even on this one, we could come back like that. You don't want them more than like maybe 1.5 feet away from the tree, and ideally more within 1 foot. So you just have this kind of like if you were to take everything else here away, you could just take like your arms and go like this down the tree and not touch any branches. Just as an ideal, Don't literally try to do that. These have only grown for 1 year. Fruit bud, fruit bud, fruit bud, fruit buds, fruit bud. They're already producing fruit buds. I would say like even on this, I'm just going to, because I want some structure out here, I'm just going to leave like a few more buds than I normally would leave. And what's going to happen is like, say, you're like, I really want to test this variety, so I'm going to let this grow out. And it grows out for like 2 or 3 feet and you don't prune it back or you just take the tip off. Well, next year it's going to go even further. And then a lot of that fruiting wood, if it makes fruiting wood, might happen way out here. Then what do you do? So now you're stuck with this thing. And in order to eventually bring the tree back, you got to cut all of it off. So after that, though, you really just want to keep these things in. So let's go look at some older stuff here. Like, what's this mess? This is just something I neglected. And this is what I'm talking about. So now I've got all this fruit wood out here. And in order to bring the tree back, well, it's all got to go. All of it. All this. Like, really, I shouldn't be past this point. That's even kind of long. There goes all the fruiting wood off that branch. 100% of it. Look at this. Fruiting wood, gone. This is where I should be out here. Or in there, rather. By the way, this is garbage. I don't even know what this is, but it's not what it says it is. It says hidden rows. This is not hidden rows. It's just some crappy apple. I don't know where I got that. So that one's slated for regrafting. Something like this, okay. I grafted this maybe a couple of years ago. Fruit, fruit, fruit. We're doing good. We don't want it to let it grow too far. I'm going to cut it here to a downward facing bud. That'll kind of grow out and then up a little bit. Next year, I'll shorten it like this. 1 or 2 of these might grow outward. that's good because that gives us more structure. Here we go again, okay? Fruit wood out here. What's this? I can't use that. I don't want that. Sometimes there's a reason I do these things. That's Zabergau. I'm not going to cut it now because I want that Scion. But yeah, this, you know, there's the trunk. This is about a foot out. So really what I want is I want it out here. I just need to label this. I don't forget. Zabergau is interesting. It's a very tart russet. If you like russets and you like tart apples, it's pretty good. It's a cool apple. I'm going to start using it in breeding more. And then I'll cut that one back to like 3 inches. Yes, I cut off fruiting wood because I'm a dork and I'm not maintaining this thing like I should. This one back here, just cut off 6 fruiting buds. This is what it should look like right here. These guys. Those are beautiful. Those are great. Okay, so let's take a look in here. I know this is probably hard for you guys to actually see very well, but this broke, so we're going to trim that back. So this is fairly new stuff. It's probably grown for 2 years, possibly 3. Here's one that's pretty vigorous. Saorit, which, yeah, this is that apple that stays crisp for a really long time. I'm really interested in this. And I don't want to prune it because, again, I want the Scions. Okay, I'm just going to get my bucket and prune this and save the Scions. Zeeberg. So with this one, this is a fairly vigorous variety, but it's getting too far out here. I do want to use this for breeding. So I'm greedy. I want as many fruiting buds as possible. It almost looks, from the short growth and the fat tips, could be a tip bearer. So in the case of like this one, I'm going to leave that tip and I'm going to cut this to that point. Okay, so we have some scrawny but plenty usable Scions here of Saorit. And now I want these, you know, I want a lot of that, so I'm going to leave it a little bit chunkier than I normally would. So normally I'd kind of bring this back, maybe cut that off, shorten this a little even to there, you know, bring this back a little more. It's kind of a special case where I want more Scion wood, I want more fruit, I want to use it for breeding, so I need as many flowers as possible. I'd like to be sending out possibly some pollen. Here's some more varieties here that are new. Let me just check the tags. Okay, there's 2 here called Zell, of something called Zell. Okay, so I'm bringing it back to within 10 inches to a foot of here. And we're just gonna keep it close. This one's a little out of control. I should have pruned that back more. There's a fruit bud right here, so I'm going to prune to that. That may stay a fruit bud, and then maybe one of these or some dormant bud will grow out. And this is out a little far, so I want to bring that in. I want to bring this in. Again, almost looks like it could be a tip bearer, but I'm just going to cut it back because it also has these little fruit buds that indicate that it's more like a spur type or closer to that. Or more likely it does both, which is kind of like very common. There's very few like really pure tip bearers. Okay, this one is Seller's Select. I don't know what that is. I just cut off a little bit of fruiting bud, but there's plenty more where that came from. And again, if I don't do this now, so here's an example of one I left to grow long because I'm like, I want fruit. Well, I got fruit, but now it's out here and I have to cut it all off. Zaychuk. So I'm just gonna lose all that fruit wood. So this one is Harrelson. I don't want this growing because it's gonna make a bunch of fruit out here and then I'll have to cut it off, cut it back to a fruit bud there. That keeps us within about 12 inches. We'll shorten that to 1 or 2 buds. Bring this back nice and close. Could have left a little more there. Bring that back, shorten what's left. This is already bearing fruit like out here, but I'll just take like half of it off and leave the rest of that. Okay, so you get the idea. I think ideal enough, like good enough, is one summer pruning when things are like about 3/4 of the way grown. So sometime in July. They grow pretty fast, so sometime in July maybe. Shorten most of it off, but leave some. It'll resprout and grow, and then later in the fall or winter come back and cut it to like maybe 3 to 4 buds. Even though I only prune once a year, it still works, and it works pretty good. So here's a good example of a nice healthy one here that I cut back, I regrafted. I did not paint for sunburn. There's some more there, some more here, some more up there. Let's count what I put on this tree. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 25, 26, 27, 29. So 29, some of them probably died and got cut off, so about 30 on this single stem. And I've gotten fruit off most of these now, 3 years later. Look at that, fruit just covered in fruit wood. So they fruit really fast. Sometimes you'll get fruit the second year. I don't think I do much different than I did the last time. A better trellis. You know, the trellis is fine, honestly. It's really, there's a turnbuckle, so I did put in a turnbuckle. It's just this wire, and I don't maintain it. Like, you need to tighten the turnbuckles. Even with the good, like, solid high tension grape wire. You know, it changes with heat and cold, and it stretches, and these are heavy. They're really heavy. Like, they'll just weigh right down on that thing, and you need to maintain it. I don't really care. It doesn't matter too much to me. It works as long as I don't totally fall all the way over. Knowing what I know now, I would probably be less greedy and put them on 2 feet. If you really are tight for space, go ahead and put them on 18. Just try to maintain them well. So one of the things I'm trying to do this week, or as soon as possible, is take cuttings off these. I have a bunch of pots. I got some soil, and I'm going to try to root these tree collards, so I have tree collards to sell this year, pre-rooted, because I'm just not that comfortable selling someone a tree collard cutting that's not rooted, because they're not hard. Like, for me, it's no big deal to just stick a bunch in the ground, and most of them will root. But, you know, if someone's going to buy one and then try to root it, it's just, I'd rather they were pre-rooted. Okay, I hope that answered all your burning questions about diagonal cordons. Great system. Go for it. It's awesome. Look, I'm an insane person. There's like 380 plus apple seeds in here. That is nuts. I don't even know what's wrong with me. I have this bed. I have another bed from last year. I have a whole like couple of rows in the nursery over there from the previous year. I don't have a place to plant them because I'm planning to move, but I don't have enough money to buy a place, and who knows how long that will take. But I don't know. I didn't get this far by being reasonable and playing it safe, and whatever. It's worked so far. Still crazy.